100.3 Phillies R&B DNA here with Mr. John Hackston, Head of Thought and Leadership at Myers Briggs Company. How you doing today, sir?
I'm just fine, thank you.
Awesome. So we'll dive right into it, man. How long have you been working with the Myers Briggs Company?
So I've actually been working for the Myers Briggs Company, and I just sat down and worked it out for over 25 years, 26
Wow.
years. So, a quarter of a century, which sounds very sobering, but I've enjoyed myself along the way.
So my next question, you might have to dig into your memory tank there. 25 years of service, 26 years actually. What is your most fond memory, and then what has been your most surprising finding during your studies?
I think when I first started using Myers-Briggs Type Indicator questionnaire, the personality questionnaire, the thing that surprised me initially was something about stress. Now, as an individual, I'm somebody who's generally quite laid back, quite restrained, but I realized that just sometimes I got really angry about things. And no other personality questionnaire had sort of quite explored that area and worked out why that was. And I've been using personality questionnaires, other personality tools in other organizations for a while. But there's a whole theory around stress and how we suddenly snap into a different place of the Myers-Briggs. That actually made a lot of sense for me, and I know it makes a lot of sense for other people. So initially, I think that was my most surprising finding in a way, the way it explained these less usual places we find ourselves in, but put that back into explaining something about who we were as a person. And I think as I've come to use it, both a fond memory and also, in a way, a surprise is just how powerful that tool is. And there's something about these sort of type questionnaires which say, this is where you are, this is where someone else is, let's look at the similarities and differences to contrast one with the other, which really helps people very quickly to understand where they live, where other people live, and so they can work together, they can live together, they can find a way of being together. And I think that perhaps surprised me quite a bit when I first started using MBTI, because again, it's something which is more unique about it as a tool.
Right. So then you kind of just cleared my next question is basically I was going to ask you to explain the benefits of MBTI. But I guess you can just talk, if you could talk about the versatility about how that can be used maybe in the workplace, maybe in your dating life.
Certainly. I mean, I think it all starts in a place of finding out more about yourself and knowing more about yourself. And once you know about who you are and know how you're different from other people, and know how to look at those differences in a positive way, to see the advantages of those differences, that's where it all kicks off in both the workplace and I think in dating as well. So it's really useful to help people to communicate with other people, for example, which is good at work, but also obviously really quite important in dating.
Yes.
Because we all tend to communicate in a way that works for us. We start off in a place that suits us. But once we realize that other people are different, we can start to say, okay, this is where this person lives. Let's see if I can talk to them in a way that works for them. And if you want to persuade them to your point of view, or just put your information over, or get them to know you as a person, I think that's really, really useful. So in the workplace, it's really useful for people working in teams. It helps people understand other people in conflict. It helps with communication. It helps you deal with stress by seeing where your stresses are, all of those sorts of things. And I guess in dating, it's really useful from those points of view as well. I know if you go on a lot of the websites out there, there are people who talk about the Myers-Briggs type in dating terms. And while the MBTI isn't used directly in a dating app, I think it's a really good place. Find out about yourself, know who you are, and know perhaps where you might fit in and how you might communicate and work with and talk with and just be with people who are quite different from yourself.
Yes, sir. So I actually did the test myself, and I'll pull up these results.
Okay.
So there are 16 different personality types, correct? And they're split off by 4 different categories, split into 2. We got extroverts, introverts, sensors and intuitives, thinkers, feelers, and then judgers and perceivers.
That's right.
So I took the test, and my personality type is the defender, which is ISFJ, and then they give me a dash T, which is turbulent versus aggressive. So mine is ISFJT.
Okay.
Could you tell me what the most common personality type would be?
Well, I'm afraid it's not yours, which may or may not be good or bad news to you. The most common personality type is actually ISTJ. So similar to yours, so introversion, sensing, but then thinking rather than feeling and judging. And that's about 16% of the population. So that's the most common type that's out there. And most people are quite similar to yourself, so you probably already looked at what it said about you as a person, and it probably said things about you quite liking things to be organised and planned and structured, things a little bit more on the introverted side, living inside your head a little bit, rely a lot on past experience, and that all applies to those ISTJs as well.
Yes.
The bit that's different is the thinking piece. So what those ISTJs do is they're trying to make order in the world around them in a logical way. They want to get stuff done. They want things to happen in a logical way based on their past experience. What your profile would suggest is, again, you want things to be organised in the outside world, but not necessarily logically in line with what you think is right, in your values, and what would work for people. And that's the difference perhaps between you and those ISTJ people.
That is absolutely correct. Now we'll take it to the flip side. What is the least common personality type?
So the least common personality type in the population is ENTJ. So two letters, the same, two letters different to an ISTJ. But these people are quite different because they are extroverts. They have an extroverted personality. And the N rather than the S, the intuitive rather than the sensing, means that they really turn on to the big picture and possibilities and connections rather than looking at detail and facts and actualities. So these are people who want things to happen in a logical way, want to organise the world of people and things, often in line with some big grand plan. So although they're one of the less common types in the world and in the United States population, they're actually very overrepresented amongst managers and high-level managers in particular, because they have a big strategic plan and they want to put that into action and want to make that happen in the world. Not to say they're necessarily any better being managers or leaders than anybody else. Because of what they want to happen, they tend to find themselves in those roles.
Now, let's say you took the personality test and you didn't really like the results you got, or you thought to yourself, well, maybe that's not who I really am. Is it possible to change your personality type as you evolve over time?
Yes and no. And let me pick that apart. Let me actually pick your question apart. So I think what you said your personality type was ISFJ-T.
Could I work on being an E?
I didn't quite catch what you said.
I'm sorry. I was saying, can I change that first letter as I grow? Right now, I'm 27. Let's just say by the time I'm 30, I want to be an E. Is that possibility to change that?
So not quite, but let me talk it through. So the way the Myers Briggs type indicator works is, I think the version you took probably wasn't the actual MBTI, it was a similar questionnaire, but the real MBTI actually isn't a test. It isn't a questionnaire, it's a process. So what you do when you take the MBTI is you take the questionnaire, it gives you a result, but then it asks you a whole lot more questions and asks you to think about it and asks you to say, is this really who you are? So ultimately, you decide who you are as a result of the questionnaire and also as a result of this effectively artificial intelligence online process that helps you to decide who you really are. Now, the theory says that your core personality doesn't really change over time. What does change is how you use it. So as you get older, at one point in your life, when it comes to midlife, and that's not midlife crisis, but it's just a time when you start perhaps to reevaluate things and you start bringing in other parts of your personality that really weren't there before. So it's not that you change as a person underneath it all, but you can learn to actually use other parts of your personality. And you can use them very effectively. So my own personality type is INTP. Introversion, intuition, thinking, and perceiving. So underneath it all, I'm very much somebody with a preference for introversion. But I do a lot of presenting. I do a lot of talking. And I'm very happy doing that to really big groups of people because that's my job.
Mm-hmm.
So we can adapt and change our behavior, whatever our underlying personality type is. But if we know our underlying personality type, that's really a springboard that we can use to change our behavior to do different things in different places as we need to do so. Knowing there's always a home that we can come back to. And those 16 types you talked about, it's a little bit like there's 16 rooms in a house. And one of those rooms is your favorite room. That's your home. That's where you spend as much time as possible when you can. But you can visit all the different rooms for different purposes when you need to do so. Some more easy than others, so you can adapt your behavior. But knowing where your home is actually really useful because you can always come back to there and really be yourself.
That was a beautiful analogy. I like that.
Thank you.
So, do you think that there is any correlation between personality types and astrology or zodiac signs?
The short answer is no. People have tried to do research into this, and really there's not a great deal of relationship, if any at all. Perhaps unsurprising, because after all, the Myers Briggs Type Indicator is a scientifically validated questionnaire. It has PhD psychologists who have done all the stats behind it, reliability, validity, everything you expect from an instrument like that. But astrology perhaps hasn't had quite the same set of evidence behind it. I mean, there's at least one place I know of that astrology has proven to be applied to everyday life and predict things. At one point in your life, astrology predicts how well you're doing, how well you're performing. Any guesses about when in your life that might be?
I mean, I would say your birth is because that's where the stars and the sun align, and that's where you get your zodiac sign from.
It is.
I would maybe say I'm sorry, go ahead.
I've probably been a bit unfair. It's been a bit of a trick question because the one place where I know there is positive evidence that astrology does relate to stuff in your life is when you're at school. And especially when I'm British, we call it primary school. In the States, it's your first years of school. Because if you think about it, if you're 5 or 6 and you're 9, 10, 11 months older than the other kids in your class, you're going to perform much better. And as you rightly said, your birth date relates to your astrology sign. But once you get to secondary school, once you get to a certain age, that correlation goes away. So generally speaking, in astrology, and apologies for anybody out there who doesn't agree with it, but the evidence suggests it doesn't relate to a lot in life, but personality type very much does. And there's lots of evidence of how it relates to all sorts of aspects of the workplace and in the world outside of workplace as well.
Okay, great answer. Thank you so much for that. How would you go about figuring out someone's personality type from face value? Is that even possible?
Yes and no, but I have to preface it by, a lot of politicians answer saying yes and no, but let me put that in context. First of all, it's probably very bad manners. Because one thing you probably shouldn't do is to look at someone and say, I know what you are. You are a...
I've met you before. I know what kind of guy you are.
Exactly. For all sorts of reasons. First of all, they know themselves better than you do, perhaps. They're the person, especially if the person you're talking to is an introvert, there's a rich inner life going on there that you know nothing about from their behavior. Secondly, you know them in a context. You know them in particular situations. Even people you know quite well, they may behave quite differently in some situations and other situations. And we talked before about how you might have an underlying personality type and that will drive a lot of what you do. But research suggests that roughly 50% of our behavior is about an underlying personality type. 50% about everything else that's going on in the world, our current situation, the way we're brought up, our current environment, all of those different things. So we need to be very careful about it. Having said that, it's useful sometimes to look at somebody and say, I'm not going to tell you who you are because you know best. But if I'm going to work with you, if I'm going to communicate with you, if I'm going to be with you, perhaps it's good to just have some hypotheses in my head about where you might live, what your personality type might be. That will help me to relate to you a little bit better. So this is a bit of a long answer to your question, I'm afraid. So the answer to your question is it possible to get those things about somebody? And the answer is, to some extent, yes. So let's think about how you might do that. So first of all, you might look at the individual and look at how they're communicating with you. Are they somebody who, when you talk to them, they reply straight away? Are they somebody who seems to be thinking things through by talking it out? Are they somebody who has very active body language? If they are, then perhaps they have those extroversion preferences. Or are they somebody, when you ask them a question, goes and thinks about it first? Are there someone who is more restrained in their body language? Are there somebody who perhaps seems to like at least some time to themselves? Maybe they have introversion preferences. Again, it's important to think that these are all your hypotheses. You could be seeing this person in an unusual situation. But again, it's useful to try and think where they are. When it comes to sensing and intuition, is it somebody who talks about in detail? Is it sometimes who talks about facts and what's really happening and says, I remember this, my past experience says this? Or is it somebody who says, what's the big picture? Is it somebody who doesn't want detailed directions? Then maybe they have preferences for intuition. Are they somebody who seems to want the logical answer? Do they talk about, when you say what's happening at work, do they talk about the tasks and projects and only get on to talking about people afterwards? Maybe they've got a thinking preference. Are they somebody who, when you say what's happening at work, says, well, this happened to that person got married, isn't it great? Oh, by the way, these are the projects I'm working on. Are they someone who has then a feeling preference? And last but not least, judging and perceiving, are they somebody who always likes things planned and organised, who seems to get rather agitated if things don't go according to schedule, or if they have to do things at the last minute? Maybe they have a judging preference. Or are they somebody who is much more relaxed and laid back about that sort of thing, and actually seems to really get a buzz of energy of doing things at the last minute? They'll get it to you on time, but on time will mean 1/2 minute before it's due. Maybe there's someone with a perceiving preference. Now, I'm shortening things, and a lot more characteristics of each type, which you know more about if you take the questionnaire and find out about it yourself. But those are some of the perhaps pointers you might want to think about it. But again, they know themselves best, and ultimately it's up to them to talk to you about who they are.
Mr. John, that was excellent, man. So for those of who are watching right now and would like to dive more deeply into themselves, where can they take this Myers Briggs Personality Test?
The best place to go, the true Myers Briggs, is to go to what's called MBTI Online. And that will take you through a process where you take the questionnaire, but then also go through that process I talked about already, about finding out more about yourself, seeing how this type is with you, and working out who you really are. And that's at www.mbtionline.com. And our website of our whole company is www.themyersbriggs.com. And obviously we're all there on sort of social media, so on Facebook, on TikTok, we're the Myers Briggs, on YouTube, we've got the Myers Briggs Company channel. So you'll probably see us popping around there as well. The other thing I was going to say is that it's worthwhile mentioning that there are lots of other type-based questionnaires around there. Obviously, we think the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator is the original and best. So do, if you can, take the actual Myers-Briggs, because some of the other ones may be quite good, I don't know, but some are certainly very variable in quality. So beware of free gifts, I guess. Take the actual Myers-Briggs.
Sounds amazing. Mr. John Hackston. Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate you. Head of Thought Leadership at Myers Briggs Company. Any last words you have for anybody listening right now?
Really, just to say that if you do take the Myers Briggs questionnaire, that's the start of a journey. And it's a wonderful journey. You will find out so much about you, more about yourself. And if you just keep using that knowledge and keep incorporating it, it'll start to live. It'll be really useful, really important in your life. And it certainly helped me individually an awful lot over the last 25 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, John Hackston, Head of Thought and Leadership at Myers Briggs Company. Thank you so much for your time, boss man. Appreciate you.
Thank you.